Shalom. This is the fourth and last of a series on God's chosen people. Is there such a thing in this New Testament age? If so, who are they? More importantly, what are they chosen for? To be elitists and subjugate us? No. We have seen in previous episodes that when God says there's neither Jew nor Greek, he also says there's neither male nor female. So if you're going to try to tell me that there's no difference between males and females, and there's no difference between their callings and their abilities, then I don't know that I really believe you. And likewise, Jews and Greeks, Jews and Gentiles have different callings. They are made differently, just as men and women are. We've already shown that since it is God that does the choosing, none may boast. And it's not proud to say you are the chosen, as long as you don't say it proudly. The difference that there is none is that we're both able to be saved and become part of God's family. We also saw that the chosen are the children of Abraham, on down through the line of Isaac and then Jacob, who changed his name to Israel. We also saw that 10 of the tribes rebelled and split from the house of David and were scattered and lost to mix among the Gentiles, and that only the Jews remain until today to identify as the biblical Israel. Who are the nation of Israel today? The Bible Israel? Who is it? Is it only the church? The true Jews, the only known remnant of Israel, were given authority of the king of Persia to rebuild Jerusalem and establish their Torah nation. Ezra 7, verses 11 through 26. Go up to Jerusalem. Whatsoever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be diligently done. Some in their haughty pride say that while the Jews were in Babylon, they adopted Babylonian customs, and therefore they're not the chosen people today. But this is totally unscriptural. The reason God turned the heart of the king of Persia was to send his chosen people back to Jerusalem to serve and glorify God. Ezra 7:20 and 23. Whatsoever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be diligently done. Are the people and the modern state of Israel, which are in that land today, the true people of Israel, the Bible Israel? Welcome to Torah Tidbits, where we seek the heart of God as preserved in the eternal principles of his Torah. Now, something to remember. All first believers were Jewish. Jesus, Yeshua, was Jewish. All of the first believers were Jewish, and some of them were leaders. Some of them were priests. Acts 6:7, a great company of the priests were obedient to the faith. Some of them were Pharisees, the early believers. Acts 15:5, the Pharisees which believed. Some of them were rulers and members of the Sanhedrin, judges. John 12:42, many of the chief rulers believed. Many of them were scribes, lawyers. Mark 12:28 through 34, Yeshua, Jesus said, you are not far from the kingdom. Now many quote John 8 and other places where Jesus spoke negatively about the Jews. How many know the multitude of places Jews are spoken of positively? We're going to look at a few of them. John 11:45. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Yeshua did believed on him. Many. John 4:22. He's talking to Gentiles. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Salvation. That doesn't mean that Gentiles can't be saved. But salvation is of the Jews. It's something that God has brought through the Jewish people, and he brought the Messiah through the house of David, through the Jewish people. Romans 1:16, Paul, who everyone said converted to Christianity and did away with the Jews being the chosen people and did away with the Torah and all of that. He identified himself as a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin. But here he said, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ." Neither should we be ashamed of it. For it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek, but to the Jew first. There is a difference. If there wasn't a difference, why would he have said that? No, it's not that Jews are any better. It's not that Israel is any better than the Gentiles or superior or anything like that. But there's a different calling. A carpenter has a different calling than a plumber, who has a different calling than an accountant. And they all have different callings than a housewife. Matthew 15:24, "I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel," not to the Gentiles, to the house of Israel. Now we've seen about those lost sheep. Those were Israelites that were mixed and mingled among the nations, and they're going to be rediscovered and regathered back, according to Scripture. Unless you believe they're just going to be magically sucked up in a rapture and the earth is going to be burned up before any of the prophecies happen. Well, let's read on. Romans 11:2. This is to the Gentiles. "God hath not cast away his people, which he foreknew." Now, anyone who wants to tell you differently, I'm not sure I would trust on this subject anyway. Romans 11:19 through 21. "If God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee." So it is the Gentiles which God is warning not to be proud, not the Jews, by denying that Jews are chosen. Now, Acts 10, when the sheet came down and God said, now the gospel can go to the Gentiles, this was nothing new. It was a visible outpouring to emphasize a point, but it was nothing new. From Exodus 12 on, it has always been possible for Gentiles to be grafted into Israel. However, read the conditions. If you want the God of Abraham and the blessings of Abraham, follow the statutes which Abraham followed. The church has to be grafted into Israel, according to the Scripture, and not the other way around. So many evangelicals are out there trying to convert Jews to Christianity. Well, I'm not saying they shouldn't know Yeshua or read and believe the New Testament, but the church can be part of Israel if it allows itself to join itself to Israel under the same conditions. Now, I'm not saying we're saved by the law. I don't want to see a whole bunch of comments where you think that's what I'm saying. Everyone was saved by the blood of Christ, by the sacrifice and the resurrection. Way on back, even in the Old Testament, nobody was ever saved by the law or by sacrifices. Numbers 15:15. One ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation, that's Israel, and also for the stranger, that's the Gentiles, that sojourneth with you. An ordinance forever. In your generations, as ye are, so shall the stranger be before the Lord, before Yahweh. Some want to reinterpret forever as not forever, but just a period of time. Yeshua, or Jesus, tells us what that period of time is. Matthew 5:18, till heaven and earth pass. That's yet to come. Genesis 26:5. Because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. We're not just talking about the 9 commandments. We're talking about commandments, statutes, laws, the whole Megillah. This was before any old covenant. God's Torah didn't come in with Moses, and neither does it go out with him. So what were the chosen people chosen for? This is even more important than who they are and all of these other details. Isaiah 49:6 tells us very clearly. And he said, "It is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob," the church, "and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth." So the reason the chosen people are chosen is to be a light to the Gentiles, to live out and proclaim God's eternal principles of Torah, unto those who know not God. And I realize that we Jews have not done a perfect job, but neither have Gentiles, neither have Christians, neither have Messianics and Hebrew rooters and every other group. We all constantly stumble. That doesn't change God's design. That doesn't make the Jews unchosen. So is the biblical state of Israel the modern state of Israel? This is a very important question and very much on everybody's minds right now in the news. All these debates, all this going on with people talking about we need to bless Israel. We're going to bless Abraham. We need to bless the people over in the state of Israel if we want God's favor. Well, let's see what the scriptures tell us. First, God can use any nation he wants, and he uses secular states daily. We read of him using Egypt several times, and also of using Assyria in Isaiah 10:5. There's not time to look at more than a couple, but reading the prophets' proclamation of the Messianic kingdom on earth, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah, shows that God is not done with the land. Though some want to over-spiritualize everything, these prophecies have not yet come to pass. Therefore, if God is true, which he is, they must be fulfilled. Maybe sooner than we think. Isaiah 2 verse 3, "And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, of Yahweh, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Not New Jerusalem, not heaven, but the same city on earth. How do I know that? Well, this is what the prophecies of the Messianic kingdom are talking about. Let's look at one that'll give us that clarity. Zechariah 14, verses 4 and 16 and 17. "And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives." This is Moshiach, the Messiah. This is Christ, which is before Jerusalem on the east. "And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations, this is earth. This isn't some glorified spirit beings floating on clouds. Left of the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the feast of tabernacles." Whoa, that's how they worship? By going to Jerusalem and keeping the feast? I thought, didn't you always hear that was all done away? God isn't contained in the land. He's not contained in a day, a holy day, a Sabbath day. Well, this is what the scripture says, and this hasn't happened yet. Has the Messiah's feet stood on the Mount of Olives and the Mount of Olives split in two? Let's read on. "And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. This is serious. It isn't like, oh, this is so neat, these Jewish feasts. We can do that if we want, but we don't have to. Well, suit yourself. This is literal. You can argue covenants with Christ himself, face to face. You can tell him, well, we don't keep feasts anymore, and you will dehydrate and starve. Do you want to quote Colossians 2 and Galatians 5 to God's face in that day and tell him we're not under that old law and we don't have to keep these feasts? Suit yourself. Zechariah 8, 4 and 5 and 23. This tells us what the time element is, when this is. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Yahweh Sabaoth, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand for very age. Well, you can't do that right now. It's a war zone. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all the languages of the nations. Okay, nations. Even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Well, that's not what I've heard from all the pulpits. I've not heard that they think that the Jews have God with them and know who God is and how to lead them to God. They're all trying to convert the Jews to not keep the Old Testament. But this is going to happen. This is in the days to come. Even though we've heard God is done with the Jews, this says otherwise. What do you mean the skirt of a Jew? Are the Jews going to wear skirts? Are they going to become trans? Or are they going to become Scottish? Or what do you mean the skirt? Well, that word in the Hebrew is tzitzit. And it means the fringes that Deuteronomy 22 tells us we should wear to remind us. Remind us of what? The commandments the church has told us we're supposed to forget? Even many Sabbath keepers think fringes are done away. Ezekiel 37, verses 21 and 22. Behold, I will take the people of Israel from the nations among which they have gone, and will gather them from all around, and bring them into their own land. From India, from Africa, from England, from Ireland, from the United States, from Mexico and the Latin countries, from everywhere. And I will make them one nation in the land, and no longer shall they be two nations, and no longer divided into two kingdoms. Well, this is a key to who the chosen people are. Right now, visibly, it's the Jews, and it's going to include the Jews that are scattered around and the lost Israelites that are scattered and mixed and mingled through the nations. He's going to gather them back to the land of Israel. This hasn't happened yet, and God is true. The lost tribes are much greater in number than the Jews, so there will be such a great gathering, such as never was seen before. Has this happened yet? Not in its fullness. We still talk about the Exodus from Egypt on Pesach, on Passover, and we're supposed to. We sit down at the table, we have an hour or two of remembrance, we read through the story, but Jeremiah 16, 14, and 15 says, Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be said, The Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But the Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands whither he had driven them. And I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. And this is repeated in Jeremiah 23, verses 7 and 8. Again, the answer is the modern state of Israel the Israel of the Bible? And are the inhabitants, the Jews living there today, the chosen people? The answer is Yes and no. Since the inhabitants of that land are truly descended from Jacob Israel, and not some impostor hybrid as falsely maligned, the answer is yes. They are some of God's chosen, only a fraction of them. There are Jews living in every nation of the world today, and only half of the 16 million Jews living today will even be found in the modern state of Israel. There are 1 million Jews in New York City alone. Now, here's where some are going to say, well, they wrote the Talmud, and the Talmud is so evil, the Jews lost their place as the chosen people. I know the Talmud better than you, having held an original in Hebrew and Aramaic in my hands. Likely, the quotes you have heard were out of context and mistranslated. I'm not trying to excuse evil, but because some Jews were unfaithful does not change God's choosing. I'm aware of the traditions of men which distract from the commandments of God. I'm aware that until now, most Jews deny that the Messiah has come. But they are still a remnant of the true physical Israel. To ignore this is to ignore one of God's most tremendous moves in the history of mankind. Though they have not fully yet fulfilled their mission they have been chosen for, they remain the chosen. Make no mistake, I also realize there are many who have Jewish names that have done great violence and evil in the world. I'll just name a couple: Kissinger, Soros, Schumer, Jeffrey Epstein, and his associates. But they are not observing the Torah, and they don't claim to honor God. I know it disappoints some of you when I say that a nation which was organized by the Rockefellers and the globalists to manipulate world powers is somehow being used by God as the Holy Land. Since that land will again be inhabited by all 12 tribes, the land itself is still considered the Holy Land of God. Holy doesn't mean like Catholic with those pictures from the Middle Ages of the halo around the head, otherworldly. It means set apart for a purpose. That land is set apart for a purpose. We read the purpose. Let's finish up here. Even though what I'm telling you is true, we need a very strong caveat, a very strong caution. That does not mean that we, as Israel-loving believers in Yeshua, must, and it doesn't mean the United States government must agree with and participate in every military conquest that Israel can dream up. There is one more fact needed to understand the place of the modern state of Israel. Let me give you an example. The United States of America has a sovereign government appointed by God, right? God says he sets up kings through the vote of the people. That's the system we have. For decades, our duly elected government has been subverted by the CIA to murder and subjugate other nations and exploit their resources. For decades, since there was a CIA and before with the OSS. Now, the Israeli government was also set up by God because God sets up kings and they have a slightly different electoral system than we do, a coalition government, but the people have appointed and elected their representatives. And their government is likewise subverted by the Mossad, the Israeli secret police, that's akin to our CIA. We are not required to bless every demand the Mossad makes in order to bless Abraham. We are not required to bless the ADL. They don't represent us, and they don't serve the Jewish people or the Christian people. We're not required to bless AIPAC. We're only required to bless Abraham. The Mossad is hurting the Israeli government. It is hurting the Israeli people. And if we support these agencies that are subverting their government, we are hurting the Israeli people. I hope this clears up the confusing and conflicting questions and doubts you have about how all of this fits together to do the holy will of God in these last days. Please Please join us again here and on our YouTube channel for Torah Tidbits on certain Shabbats to study the heart of God as preserved in the eternal principles of His holy Torah. Shalom.